Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Fantastic to see you again.
It's been a while.
Take a seat.
Thank you.
Don't get a mortar in the back.
This is odd. I'm on the wrong channel, or the right channel,
I hope it's the right channel. Yeah, some would say a preferable channel, but let's not go there. This is Dave Jewitt, for those of you who do not know, and if you don't know, you should. And there are lots of videos somewhere else that you might want to look at on that subject. But you do video games.
I do.
If I recall.
A lot of video games. Still talking about video games, still talking about guns in games. Doing that on my YouTube channel, @RegularDave. Twitch channel, twitch.tv/RegularDave. Getting the plug in early now.
Do it.
Obviously, everyone knows who this is. This is Jonathan Ferguson, Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. I have to get that in there because there would obviously have been multiple comments if I didn't, and now there will be multiple comments saying he said the line. So, you know, thanks for the engagement.
Yep. Although, if you kept it to the end, that might have kept people watching to the end.
Watch to the end anyway. We're interesting enough.
He'll do it again at the end.
Yeah. Whatever you want, I'll do it.
Dance monkey. Anyway, fantastic to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
So we are going to kick off with our top 5 of the year.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about my top 5 games which feature firearms, and you're going to be more specific about, I guess, the virtual representation of a specific firearm in your top 5 games.
Yeah, I instinctively took the brief as each gun, because that's just how my brain works. But I think the two
that makes sense for us, being the game nerd with some gun knowledge. Talk more broadly about games.
Yep.
Gun nerd with some game knowledge. We complement each other that way.
Yep. Yeah. But I must admit, as I was revising for this, it did occur to me that I was thinking of how the game more generally represented the guns, and that there was, if they did one right, there was usually more than one.
Yeah.
So we could have done both, but let's do both.
I've been playing the new Indiana Jones game, The Great Circle.
I do want to play that very much.
And I've been enjoying it so much. I was in the hotel last night watching The Last Crusade, which is the best Indiana Jones film.
Interesting. I also think this.
Because it's true. We're both agreeing on it, so therefore we've established it as fact. So Indiana Jones and the Great Circle isn't really a shooter, I would say. My experience of the game is it's much more exploration, stealth, but for a game that isn't about shooting guns, the guns are like really well modeled, and there's a lot of really cool details and the accuracy and the setting that, would have been exciting to show you because I know you'd appreciate. Like, it features the MP28 rather than the MP40 because it's set in 1937.
Nice.
And a lot of it is when it starts, it's in Italy.
Probably more accurate than the movies then, because they were a little bit faster than these.
Yeah, and just the way their model's really, really detailed. You don't even really shoot down, you're not looking down your sights. It's very much from the hip, so it's also playing into that sort of matinee action that Indiana Jones the movies play into. That scene from The Last Crusade when he shoots the MP40, it's from the hip. And largely, it's from the hip, the scene with the revolver.
Which was the style at the time.
So it's all really well modeled. A lot of the time, though, you're using weapons as a blunt instrument, which might have made you wince. So if you're sneaking through, a dig site and you're trying to...
That feels on brand as well, though.
Yeah, using... And all the punches and hits have that big, like, wham sound effect. But there'll be moments where you're clubbing enough people around the dome piece with an MP28 that it breaks.
Oh, really?
And as soon as that happened in the game, I knew that you would be like, oh no, not that sweet, sweet gun. And like, even as Webley, he's holding it backwards so he can knock someone out and drag them away and hide their body out of sight so that he can keep sneaking through this, through like the Vatican or something. But the firearms are, like I said, really well represented. There's moments from the movies, like the revolver scene, some guy swinging a sword, and you have the option as a player to shoot that individual. And at one part of the game, you're flying, you're in the gun seat of a Soviet biplane shooting a Dushka, and you can shoot the tail of your own plane off.
Right.
So not only is there
these
really
are like optional references.
If you as a player, I think, missed the plane tail enough, it wouldn't affect things. But the fact that there's enough detail in the guns that I was like, oh, this is really cool to see. And it's coming from Machine Games, who have a long legacy of making cool guns in games and making games where you punch Nazis. Which is something, I for one appreciate. And it's really cool to see as a package that sort of realism, and we've talked about this before, it's authenticity and the balance of realism. So it's authentic to the historical setting and the firearms within without them being the focus, but it's also authentic to the Indiana Jones movie. So the fact that,
more important, really.
Yeah, they might not be the most realistic firearms in the world, but the way that they were positioned in the game, for me, made it one of the coolest implementations of firearms that I've seen in games this year.
That's extremely encouraging.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten around to it. I'd love to. So, by the magic of editing, here we go.
So this, like I said, it's almost feels sacrilegious to grab it by the barrel and start swinging it. So I won't do that. Obviously, in the game, that's sort of how it's represented. But
that's funny.
It's very much the,
I mean, that would work, by the way.
From here, hip firing, spray and pray. You don't even really need to worry about reloading it too much, because by the time you next come across an enemy, you're hitting them around the wrist with a whip to take their weapon, or trip them up, or go in with fisticuffs.
Yeah.
But just the choice to use this weapon rather than something like an MP40 because of the year was something that I was like, oh, someone's paid attention. And as we've talked about for hours upon end, we love it when people pay attention.
Yeah, no, they needn't have done that. They could have, like the movies often just use what's available or what they think the audience is going to like, because it was a different era. You didn't have millions of nerds watching, and that has changed. As we've observed doing what we do respectively, and the same is true in the movies as well. Their audience expectations have changed. Maybe not to the point of someone's mum sitting there going, "That shouldn't be an MP40," but they try. Whatever the reasons, they try to get stuff right now. And the game's done that. And I always say, if you can get it right without costing a fortune and causing massive headaches or crimping your creative style, you definitely should. Someone needs to tell Ridley Scott that, by the way. But
I don't know if there's many people waving these around in the Vatican, but
maybe not.
We'll allow Indiana Jones that creative liberty.
Maybe not. So they're doing the overhand thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of talk about this. Like you're on this one, you're supposed to hold it here. It's what these grooves are for. On the sten, it's kind of up choked up round here, which is really awkward. There's a difference between what what the books, what the drill manuals, the pamphlets and things say, and what people found was actually expedient in warfare. And needless to say, there would have been an awful lot of this. The only real problem is if you start levering away on the magazine down here.
Well, the first soldiers that I saw use it in the game were actually Italians. Was it issued to Italians? Was that where we get a little more?
Well, you got some leeway there, because there's a whole series of Beretta submachine guns in use by then, that they would likely have, but given that they're kind of getting into bed with the Germans, depending what the setting is.
That is towards the end of the first act. You start seeing the Italians and the Germans coming together, and that whole storyline sort of culminating and beginning down that path as well. So there is a nod to the actual users of the weapons.
This is the other thing for me with like that sort of suspension of disbelief, verisimilitude thing is it at all plausible? And if it is, especially if it's a game, great. It's Battlefield 1's the ultimate there. So many guns that were never actually used in the field, but people want them. They want the variety, they want the fun, they want the visual interest, and they want the learning as well. People have learned a ton from stuff like that. So people going into that game expecting to see an MP40 or something, they see this instead, they'll go away and look it up, and that's and then we've got them. So I have tried to put mine in some sort of order, and it might be best if I just go and get it and then explain.
It's fun seeing this in person.
Yeah.
The amount of times I've been in front of a camera and be like, "I'll just go get something," and I'm just in my room. Now I can actually watch and see where you're going.
So, something that we recorded but did not get to see released was the guns of Black Ops 6.
Good game.
And This actually isn't quite correct, ironically.
I, for one, am very surprised that you've got this weapon out, not knowing that it's one of your favourites.
Yeah, loose. I mean, the loose type, like shorty retro AR-15s are definitely my jam, as it were. Which is why I was always railing about the XM4 or the Commando from the Black Ops games, because it's symptomatic of what was wrong right from the start with those games. I enjoy them, but the retro setting was kind of squandered in various ways, mainly with the kit. Like, people are probably not looking at like Ford Escorts and go, that's the wrong mark of Ford Escort, but I'm doing it for the guns. And the real kind of elephant, well, it's not an elephant in the room at all, it's really obvious, but the lack of the carrying handle. So for enthusiasts of things like this shape here is really quite iconic, and part of the whole thing. And so by doing away with that, and I think the original intent was to imply that it was this prototype thing, the prototype of what you've been using in the other COD games, I think, is what they were going for. And then you had the ridiculous sling wrapped around it that I spent a bit of time ranting about sarcastically.
You love to rant about a sling, to be fair.
It was the way it was stuck behind the bolt hold open on that version of it. Anyway, I'm rambling here. Point being, I'm kind of throwing them a bone because I still haven't played Black Ops 6, but the version of the XM4 that's in that, the base version anyway, I know you can change it up.
Yeah.
But they finally got it right. They put on the carrying handle. Now, the reason I say this isn't quite right is that the name is wrong still on the Black Ops 6 gun. They call it XM4. That's a slightly different Colt carbine model. But the gist was there. And their version has the M4 type barrel on there. Now, it's too long. But I think I said in the record, it's like a civilian market 16-inch long one. And you can just tell from the proportions it's too long. That's not wrong for this one, by the way, because this model, Colt didn't even know what their own model numbers meant. It's basic. I'm literally researching this at the moment for an article, and they don't. They weren't consistent at all with their model numbers. And this one was one of the most changeable. So this was a model 723. Delta Force famously used it, among others. UK Special Forces had them as well. And they changed the whole time, I guess because it was popular. They had different parts in the parts bins, and the customer maybe wanted different features. So they would just change bits of the gun. So it's easier to get it right, essentially. So the one in the game has a case deflector on here. That's not incorrect. There are versions that have that. Different features changed over time, like the barrel as well. So the loose model 723, I think this is the one I grabbed for the record. I was just really happy to see a carrying handle. I could have just said that, couldn't I?
Yeah, I think in Black Ops 6 as well, they are very aware that sort of this is the sort of iconic silhouette again, because there's if you're exploring the hideout, there's like weapon benches with like an old laptop with a schematic of this, where you see the carrying handle. This is the shape, and there's even like exploded diagrams in the game world that you can find of.
Someone sent me a photo of one.
The exploded diagram is a little off.
It looked really cursed.
Yeah, but I think they are, conscious that with the setting of the game being, the time period that it's in, it has to be at least somewhat like this. And then obviously you can do whatever you want with it in multiplayer. But that's one thing that I've lent more towards after doing so many videos with you, is I tend to keep it more default. I'll go for like customization options that keep the general silhouette of the look pure now. So that's how you've cursed me.
Well, this was the frustrating thing about that, and it's such a minor thing, I know, but it's what we're here to talk about.
Everything we talk about is a minor thing in a grand scheme of things.
It was frustrating because this was designed from the outset to be able to mount an optic. That's what this hole is for. In the carrying handle, and the angles in here are designed for a mount to drop in, get screwed on, and you've got an optic. And people like the look of that as well, where you've got like an ACOG or something up here. They needn't ever have done that non-existent flat top XM4. But anyway, they fixed it, and I was happy about it. And maybe one day I'll get around to actually playing the game.
So the next game I want to talk about that stood out to me as how it features firearms is one that I've not shown you. It's a game called Sulfur. It's a very sort of cartoony, animated, first-person roguelike.
Okay.
But it's set in this sort of roguelike world where you're shooting goblins. There's, you know, weird occult things happening. It's very cartoony. It's very, you know, it's leaning into its own fiction. But instead of, you know, melee combat or magic, there are elements of that. It's very firearms focused. But the way it treats firearms is really interesting, and I think some people might call it cursed, but it can lean towards cursed, but I sort of love it. So there'll be guns that are just obviously just a C96 that someone has illustrated, but then they've done their own thing with a lot of them as well. There's like laser weapons, there's triple-barreled like scrap-made shotguns, but then there's also weapons that aesthetically you look at it and you go, that's a Chris Vector, but then you go to reload it, and it's being reloaded by what looks to be 3-round on-block clips. So it's like little three sets of 9mm 9mm M-block clips in at once. You're just like thumbing them in and then shooting them in bursts. There's weapons where it looks like a scrap-made machine pistol, and the cocking handle is the stock. So it starts really squat, and then you pull the entire stock back and seat it into your shoulder.
This is worse, by the way. This is worse than when they show me the footage.
I'm
imagining can't possibly be.
It's so much worse. There's a weapon that's the magazine is side mounted, but that's also the charging handle. So you put the magazine in and then pull it back.
No wonder you want to show me this.
It's because in its universe, in its setting, I think it makes more sense because it's all magic and occult and fictional.
Okay.
And the roguelike element of it means that you're customizing your gun as you go through the game. So you could have a multi-barreled weapon and find a suppressor, but the suppressor goes on every barrel.
Right.
You could find multiple different mounts to have an optic for your single barrel rifle, something very basic, or something like really bizarre, like an enchanted fire-spewing belt-fed machine gun. And you look at them all in isolation, you're like, that's a bit cursed. That obviously doesn't make sense. But it's one of those things that we've gone back to before. It's like, if it's not trying to make sense, if it's trying to be its own thing, it's not saying that this is a Chris Vector. It's this gun is like an alternate, you know, Doctor Strange has gone into one of his infinite dimensions and they found a Chris Vector that takes 3-round 9mm on-block clips and shoots in a burst. But it's so bizarre, but it's so charming. Like you can convert weapons to fully automatic by finding the right pieces. If you defeat a boss, it might drop better armor or a better magazine, and it's all animated and realized really, really well. You can tell a lot of love has gone into this game, but it's just, you know, it's very firearms forward, but in a very sort of fictional, magical way. And I think it would be a game that you'd be like, ugh, and then by the end of it, you'd be like, oh no, I sort of get it. Because again, it's not trying to be real, but Sulfur is a game that stood out to me as it's done something interesting with firearms in pop culture, which I have to, you know, tip my hat to.
Yeah. Yeah, the magazine as cocking handle is still making my brain twitch slightly.
It's under a lot of pressure as well, so you can see the animation like really like and like under a spring load or something. It's very good, but I think you would call it cursed.
Yeah, it sounds like the sort of thing people have started sending me on the internet to see what I say.
They could be sending you worse stuff, I guess.
But like you say, the setting justifies and excuses a load. Like this sounds very sort of Warhammer adjacent.
It's
Is that the aesthetic of the guns, or are they more realistic?
No, it's very. It's how did somebody described it in a YouTube comment that was, if Forgotten Weapons did an episode in the Adventure Time universe.
Oh wow, okay.
So whatever
That's
you're
very
picturing,
evocative.
it's very cartoony, very.
I'm
like,
intrigued.
Almost like cell shaded animation, but it's cool. And I think they deserve some props for, again, it's hard to do something interesting with firearms in pop culture now as well. And they are definitely doing that, for better or worse.
Yeah, good. Well, I look forward to checking that out.
Yeah, I'll show you sometime.
So,
this magician's movement.
The awkwardness of this might be an indication of why I've chosen this one. Feel free to refamiliarize yourself. Actually, you may not have picked one of these up.
No, I don't think I have. Have you got this because of Arma?
Correct.
Yeah,
it wasn't too difficult.
I was looking to see if looking at the iron sights and seeing like, oh, why has Jonathan got this? But of course, I know that game resonated with you.
It did.
For good reason.
Yeah, and actually, this is one of those where I picked a gun, but I was kind of thinking of the whole game because this exemplifies the approach that those guys have taken. This is the Prairie Fire DLC for Arma 3, by the way. Hello to the developers of that one, because this is wrong. This is another one that's not quite representative of the game gun, although the full-length one's in there as well, I think.
Yeah.
But what they did there was, and this is something I'd heard about in Vietnam that was done, and the MAC S.O.G guys did this. I think they weren't the only ones to do it. They may have been the first. I can't remember. They cut down the barrel to basically the gas block on this thing. This is the RPD for those of you who may not know. Belt-fed, Kalashnikov caliber, fairly high rate of fire, really quite handy for a machine gun, a belt-fed machine gun of its era, 1950s, 60s. Even more handy if you lop the end of the barrel off, and that's what they did. So what the developers at Savage did, and they've done this for multiple weapons, is they included different versions. So it's almost like they read about something, they heard about something from their veteran friends, and they felt like, well, we've got to include that. So we look at the RPD in the game. As I say, I think you've got the full-length version as an option anyway, but why would you bother with that? They've got the classic version that people might have seen, where it's cut down here and the front sight was cut off and welded on here. So the whole thing is way shorter and handier. I mean, you can feel how awkward this would be.
Oh yeah.
Relatively
especially
light and
with a belt
portable,
of ammunition.
Yeah, for sure. So really wieldy for a light machine gun, but still not that wieldy in the jungle. So they just chop the barrel down. The thing still functions, seemingly, most of the time, and they welded the sight on there. But what really exemplifies the nerdy detail to which these guys went is they did the version, it's called LCID in the game, because Major Ken Bora, if I pronounce that correctly, he was one of these operators, Special Forces guys, and he just went, nah, don't need the front sight. We're not using the front sight. They're using tracer fire to help aim. They're firing from the hip. These guys practiced until they could shoot stuff out of the air, firing from the hip. That's how good they were. So something, if you just saw this version of the RPD cut down where they didn't bother to weld the sight back on here, you'd go, oh, you know, Bubba's been at it again in the shed. But no, this was just a case of this guy thought, what's the point in wasting the time and effort to put the sight back on? It may even, like if you have to bring it up and look over it, that might even get in the way of your field of view or something. I don't quite know what his logic was, but it clearly worked. So they included both versions. So I have to respect that level of historical accuracy. They wanted the whole DLC is a tribute to the actual soldiers, and that tiny little nerdy detail just exemplifies that for me.
Those guys do a tremendous job and have done a tremendous job with the DLC they made, with how much research went into it, how authentic it feels, the accuracy. Like there's even moments in the firing range that they're over the radio. They're talking about specific weapons, and it all feels very in setting. Like it feels like someone from that era is walking you through those firearms, and it works. And it's really great to see from a historical accuracy point of view and an authenticity point of view, but it also works so well in Arma. A lot of the time when you're playing Arma, you are just sort of looking over and leading your shots with tracer fire. And there's not many games that allow you the opportunity to fire and change your target or lead your shots just based on tracer fire, but Arma does, because it's a feature that's been implemented. So it's a real sort of nice marriage between what they've done with the weapons in terms of the authenticity and what's possible in the DLC and the general game engine. It works super well. And yeah, when we made that episode, you got very nerdy about that, which was also nice to see.
Yeah, well, it's a great example of how you can achieve immersion other than super high fidelity, high resolution graphics, VR. Those are great too, but immersion through sheer force of nerd is also a thing. And just little things like you were talking about the aiming over the gun thing. You find in the game, it is still a game. It can never simulate their experience, but they play it too. They've got these veterans playing their game. That's the ultimate endorsement. But you do get little moments where you see something you've read about or you've heard in an interview, and you find that your Car 15 or whatever, you're using it without looking through the sights. You go, that is more effective in this setting at this time with tracer bullets. So it's just that little. That's the most you can hope for, really, with any kind of media, is to give a little window of insight into what the reality really was. And that they nailed it.
Yeah, hats off to them. So I want to talk about S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 because it's a great game. It's a great game. I know not all the guns are accurate, but again, this is one of the games that the implementation of the firearms really speaks to me. One of them being what you've got under the table, AK-74U. Not the first gun I'm going to talk about. The first gun I'm going to talk about is the
I don't have any more down here.
Well, it's probably just as well with this one, because the Viper 5, we've talked about the Viper 5 in the original S.T.A.L.K.E.R games, and it's still wrong. It's still backwards. It's still... I think I showed you a clip. I was playing the game on stream and I had an Airsoft MP5, and I tried to do like a Mum, we have Jonathan Ferguson at home sort of breakdown.
You did a great job.
Well, after working with you for so long, I can sort of... I can do the basics. But aside from that gun, the rest of the weapons, and I mean, even that one, they're so well implemented. Like, to me, one of the things that's really nice is like this, just like the rattle, the sort of like the movement of a gun helps sell its place in the player's hands. That's one of the things that S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 does really well. It really makes you feel like the weapon in your hands is a part of the world. And as stressful as it is, especially in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, because I'm an absolute coward. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 has enough cool gunplay in it, has enough cool authenticity in it, has enough cool weapons in general, the setting's really cool, that makes me put on my big boy pants and brave my way through all the horror bits to experience all that, which might be one of the highest compliments I can play a first person shooter, especially one, the scary one. But you know, the whole vibe of S.T.A.L.K.E.R being not post-apocalypse, but you're in this sort of, you're in the wasteland, you're in the zone.
You're in your own little apocalypse, really.
Yeah, weapons are degrading, they're jamming, and that's one of the things that works really well in S.T.A.L.K.E.R games. All the manipulation is really well animated, from attaching suppressors and sights to the variety of weapons, to the reloads, to the different magazines that you can use to reload those, and then all the animations for when they're jammed. And that's something that will happen very frequently. You'll be shooting away at a mutant with an AK, and then all of a sudden you've got a stovepipe out the side, and you've got to try and figure that out. You've got to run away from the mutant or the bandits that are shooting you.
Step one, run away.
Yeah, which I think is good advice when you're shooting irradiated mutants in a irradiated zone. I mean, I think I would have run away before even picking up a gun, personally. But it all just works really well, and they're all modelled really, really, really well. Like,
yeah, it looks good from what I've seen.
They've put so much hard work into it, and
except for the whole left. Like, is that because they've locked into this is what the one in the game looks like, so we're going to have to do it again?
Yeah,
is that what it is?
Because everything else looks really high fidelity, really well realised, really well modelled. It's just the Viper 5 MP5 having the, you know, cut-out iron sights, the charging handle, the injection port on the same side, on the left side. I think that's just because it was in the previous games.
They're being faithful to their own canon rather than to the MP5.
Because a lot of the other guns are much more realistic. And even the guns they feature, like they have, is it the Malyuk? The Ukrainian bullpup?
Yeah.
They feature that in the game, which is, you know, very Ukrainian, very, you know, period specific, a very specific gun in general.
Yep.
But probably the first weapon that a lot of players will acquire is this. and it'll tend to be the one that stays with you throughout. I mean, it's still in my inventory to this part of the game, but it has more, modern firearms like a 416, but they've all got the same sort of treatment. They're really well realized. You've got to take care of them, otherwise you're going to risk a jam. Ammunition and the type of ammunition you fire is a concern. But it's another one of those games that I'm like, having worked with you so much, I know the bits that you would have been like, oh, that's cool, that's really nice. Like even the pump action shotguns, it's so weird to see a pump action shotgun get reloaded and the thumb go very deep into the tubular magazine and know Jonathan would appreciate how deep that thumb went. And like when you're emptying a gun of ammunition, they're racking it to eject the shells so you can reuse them. So it's that we've talked about various types of realism and various types of authenticity. The authenticity in handling is something I think S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is doing really well, from just firing it, reloading it, manipulating it, to manipulating jams and fixing those. And it does the S.T.A.L.K.E.R thing of shooting a bandit in the head, they're gonna fall down. The mutants are very spongy, especially when you're shooting high caliber stuff. But as a package, that edge of your seat horror survival, it does that really well, and the guns exist in that sort of game tremendously.
Good. Sounds good. I'm not sure I'll ever put on my big boy pants and get around playing it.
I'm still quite early.
It's always intrigued me. The setting is alone would make it worth trying out. But I've yet to jump. I was waiting for the new game, and now I'm looking for an excuse.
So I was like,
you're not helping by
5 minutes in, and I'm like
scary.
shrieking.
I've had enough. I've fully had enough. What the?
Like it's.
I did Resident Evil 7 VR, as I never tire of telling people.
You'll be absolutely fine. What are you talking about? Resident Evil 7 VR, I think, would send me into some sort of medical event. Way braver than I am. You can play S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, jeez.
I definitely have to give it a go. I just won't use the MP5.
No,
Out of respect.
that would send you into a medical event.
No fool on this guy.